Good evening, everyone. Welcome to the John F. Kennedy Jr. Forum. I'm delighted that you can all be here tonight for this special and important occasion. Today, we will be presenting the 2019 Gleitzman Award to Tarana Burke, the civil rights activist and founder of the global Me Too movement for survivors of sexual assault. For more than a decade, Tarana Burke has done vital work on behalf of all of us in raising awareness about sexual violence and the impact of such violence on everyone, and especially on the most marginalized among us. Along with other female activists, she was the Time Person of the Year for 2017, among many, many other honors. And tonight, we are fortunate to have the opportunity to recognize her ourselves and to learn from her in person. The Gleitzman Award was launched a quarter century ago by Alan Gleitzman and his life partner, Sherry Roche. Alan established the Gleitzman Foundation to support social change that improves people's lives. The Gleitzman Award recognizes the accomplishments of social activists who have inspired others and shaped our world for the better. Alan once said that the purpose of the award is to, quote, recognize people who make a difference, tell their story, and make other people aware of what one person can do, unquote. In 2006, Alan and Sherry decided that the Gleitzman Award needed an academic home, and they made a generous gift to the Center for Public Leadership here at Harvard Kennedy School. Their gift has enabled the center to continue the award program and to share the lessons of the awardees with our community here and with the broader community across the country and around the world. Past winners include Malala Yousafzai, Nelson Mandela, Gloria Steinem, and Congressman John Lewis. Alan and Sherry's generous gift also allows us to bring students who are social activists to the Kennedy School as Gleitzman Leadership Fellows, many of whom are in the audience here tonight. Welcome to all of you. And we have a professorship named in honor of Alan as well. That chair is currently held by Julie Battilana, who is also with us this evening. The director of the Center for Public Leadership, whom I will turn this evening over to in a moment, is Wendy Sherman. Wendy is a professor of the practice of public leadership here at the Kennedy School. We are lucky to have persuaded Wendy to join us here as the latest stage of her distinguished career in public service. Wendy was the U.S. Undersecretary of State for Political Affairs and led the team of Americans who negotiated the nuclear deal with Iran. Earlier in her career, she was a social worker who assisted battered women and troubled families, and she was the state of Maryland's first director of child welfare. She was also the chief of staff to then Congresswoman Barbara Mikulski and later campaign manager for Mikulski's first successful Senate campaign. Throughout her career, Wendy Sherman has shown a commitment to principled and effective public leadership. Please join me in welcoming her to the podium, where she will introduce our 2019 Gleitzman Award recipient. Thank you.
Good evening, everyone. I always start my classes, it's in the morning, I say good morning. I want everybody to say good morning back because it wakes up, so good evening. Good evening. One more time, good evening. It is great to be with you all here this evening and to welcome you to this very special event. Before we get started, I want to acknowledge, welcome, and thank a few of the people in this room. Of course, the Dean of the Harvard Kennedy School, Doug Elmendorf, who's known around here as Doug. The Academic Dean, Iris Bonet, who is right there. The Gleitzman Professor, Julie Battilana, that Doug already mentioned. Institute of Politics Director, who really owns the forum, Mark Guerin. Our 2019 Gleitzman Award judges. These are public nominations, and then a group of faculty working with me and my staff make a set of decisions and make sure it's okay with the dean, and then go forward. I also want to thank a former Gleitzman Award winner and anti-tobacco activist, Jeffrey Wygand, who is here with us this evening. Where's Jeffrey? I think. Maybe he's on that red line I hear that's stuck. Also want to thank the Boston area and Harvard organizations on campus that came for the Community Resource Fair earlier today that serve and support those affected by sexual violence. One of the things that the organizations told us this afternoon is that they're rarely in the same room together, the Harvard systems and the community systems. And bringing them all here together gave them a chance to talk to each other, as well as to talk to our community here at Harvard Kennedy School. I want to welcome Tarana's daughter, Tana Burke. And I want to welcome our award winner. Tarana Burke has been working at the intersection of racial justice and gender equity for nearly 3 decades. She started as a child. Fueled by a commitment to interrupt sexual violence and other systemic issues disproportionately impacting marginalized people, particularly Black women and girls, Tarana has created and led campaigns that have brought awareness to the harmful legacies surrounding communities of color. Throughout her early activism as a young woman in Alabama, Tarana realized too many girls were suffering through abuse, without access to resources, safe spaces, and support. In 2007, she created Just Be, an organization committed to the empowerment and wellness of those girls. The Me Too movement was born shortly thereafter as an entry to healing for survivors and a way for young people to share their stories. In 2017, when Me Too as a hashtag went viral, Tarana emerged as a global leader in the evolving conversation around sexual violence. She intentionally placed the focus on survivors and the need for survivor-centered, survivor-led solutions. Her theory of empowerment through empathy is changing the world we all think, the way all of us in the world think and talk about sexual violence, consent, and body autonomy. Importantly, her work has served to increase access to resources and support for survivors and paved a way forward for everyone to find their place in the movement. And so tonight, I'm going to call Tarana and Doug back up in a moment. We honor Tarana's overwhelming impact and courageous activism with Harvard's Gleitzman Citizen Activist Award. This award, this right here, was a specially commissioned sculpture by Maya Lin, the creator of the Vietnam Veterans Memorial in Washington, D.C., and the Civil Rights Memorial in Montgomery, Alabama. In addition to this sculpture, because of the largesse of Alan Gleitzman and Sherry Roche, Tarana will receive a personal check for $125,000. So, Tarana Burke, Dean Elmendorf, if you will join me on stage. This is yours now.
Oh, thank you.
So,
Thank you.
thank you.
Thank you.
I can take this for you. So now Tarana gets to say a couple of short words, but then she and I are going to be in conversation around these issues for about 20 or 25 minutes, and then open it up to all of you, and I'll give you the instructions for that Q&A in a minute. Tarana Burke, our Gleitzman Award winner.
Thank you. Thank you. Thank you. Okay, don't do that. Thank you. Y'all gonna make me emotional. Thank you. Thank you. Thank you. Thank you. Okay, Harvard, y'all not gonna make me emotional tonight. Thank you very much. Thank you, Wendy. Thank you, Doug. Thank you to everybody. I had a wonderful day on campus today. It was so enlightening and inspiring, really, to meet some of the students that are coming out of these programs and to see what's happening. People outside of Harvard have their own ideas of what Harvard is and what's happening on this campus. So to actually be inside and see the kind of innovation and social justice work that's being cooked up here is really, it's nice. It was nice to see and nice to be a part of that experience. I usually have prepared remarks when I come, and this usually for your benefit, not mine, because I'll go on forever and ever. So I'm gonna try not to do that, save it for our conversation. I know there's a lot of excitement in the air right now and a sort of renewed energy after this Weinstein verdict, but I need y'all to calm down. We got a lot of work to do, and I guess we'll talk some more about that. But I am really grateful for where we are. Thinking that, my girlfriend Latasha Brown is in the audience, and I'm sure half of y'all know her here because that's Tasha Brown. But Latasha and I started this work together very much in Alabama a long time ago. We won't talk about decades. And it's so exciting for us to be here together and to see how that work has fully evolved and see that the world is finally caught up to where we stayed in the grassroots and the world is finally caught up to it. So I'm just excited. And yeah, I guess we can chat. We can rap a taste now. Yeah. Okay. Thank you. I also want to make clear, my baby got very excited around that check. Personal. No.
It's for your mom.
It's for mama. You hear that?
Speaking for all the moms here.
Thank you.
It's for your mom. My daughter's here too. So, Tarana, I said this to you earlier today. Tarana, Sarah Wald, who everybody here knows, policy advisor to Doug and chief of staff, chaired a off-the-record meeting with the Title IX and the OSAPR. I always forget what OSAPR stands for, but it's all of our resources to protect and help people who are confronted with sexual violence. And I learned a lot. And what I think and it has me thinking about how I listen about these issues and what we can do. And I wonder, Harvard, I know people think Harvard's a perfect place, but it's not.
Imagine.
And I would really appreciate if you could share with this audience, because you've now been to colleges and universities all over this country. I think you told us maybe by now 200 of them.
Almost 200, yeah.
What you think institutions like Harvard, though there's nothing like Harvard, but what institutions can do to get better at meeting the needs of those survivors you have spent your life trying to help?
Really, to be succinct, because we could parse out a lot of details around that. I think there's so much opportunity on college campuses, but particularly institutions like Harvard that sits as a leader. And there are some institutions that when they make changes, other people follow, and they set a standard. I think these kind of institutions can have, and I'm not saying that you don't, but can have a modicum of courage that they haven't had in the past. And that, well, you can clap for that, but what that looks
it's
like.
Okay to applaud that.
But what that can look like is what I said in the meeting. So much happens on college campuses. It's a microcosm of the world. But you have these small communities that you can try out new things in, that you can take a step to the side. I forgot how many colleges they said and universities are within Harvard.
A lot.
A lot, right? Imagine if you just said in 2 or 3 of those, we're going to pilot this different way of looking at accountability. We're going to, we have Title IX, but we want to try something different to talk about a different framework for approaching this. I think institutions, colleges and universities across the country have to be a little more courageous and have to be not be afraid to fail, right? Because what we know from colleges and institutions is that you learn from your mistakes. These are the places where you fail, and you don't just fail here, it gets evaluated, right? You talk about it, you pick it apart, you try to understand where the failure came from, and then you do it again. And we need some of that innovation and some of that courage in this moment. And then when you fail, say, we tried this thing and it didn't work. Be transparent about that so that people can see that, I think, understand the process that you're going through, and we're going to try something else. I would love to see that happen on more college campuses, because it's ripe for that kind of dreaming. And we tell the students all the time, come here and dream and innovate and be different and blah, blah, blah. And then the institutions are rigid and like, well, Title IX says we can't do that, so we just won't. Not saying y'all do that. But it's what I see at a lot of college campuses, so it would be great to see a different kind of innovation.
You mentioned in this answer the issue of accountability. Mm-hmm. And you mentioned the Harvey Weinstein case this week, which was certainly about one kind of accountability. Yeah. Can you talk a little bit about what that case was for you and what it wasn't, and what you think we learned from it and what you think we missed?
So, I remember obviously the days prior to Me Too going viral, I was just another citizen. And I remember seeing on social media this fight, this sort of controversy that was happening because some actress called for a day of silence they wanted all women not to tweet that, y'all remember this? It was like they called for all women not to tweet that Friday. They say it was like a Friday. Mm-hmm. And the immediate reaction from Black women and other women of color was, why? Why should we be in solidarity with you in this moment around this Hollywood case when you all haven't been in solidarity with us over several different things that have erupted online? And I was sort of observing from the side. I thought it was really interesting. And so when, I remember reading the articles around the case and thought, I felt for the women in the articles just because the stories were just so terrible, just like anybody else, just empathy. But I did not feel connected personally to it, like I think many people did. It was a story. It was like, I'm glad this is exposed. And then when, after Me Too goes viral and I start meeting some of these people, some of the women who would come forward, I felt very connected, just because that's what happens when you meet people in real life, right? They come out of the fantasy or the movies or your television, and they're real people. And I saw them as just survivors, just women who have been through things that I've been through, who are just trying to live, put one foot in front of the other. And so in that regard, I wanted for them what I want for all survivors. I wanted some catharsis. I wanted some healing. I wanted to try to be, help them find this road to back to themselves like I do for other people. So in that way, the case took on a level of importance personally because I felt connected to them. But in the larger sense, I realized in the last 2 years that so many people, for different reasons, were riding on the outcome of this case as a judgment of the entire movement. And so what it's not is an indictment or even of the movement, of what Me Too is. I read something today where somebody wrote an op-ed that said we're moving into the next phase of the justice phase of the Me Too movement. And I thought that's so short-sighted. One, there's not a survivor out here who doesn't want some form of justice. Our justice looks different, though. It just looks different for different people. But what we want more than justice, and there's data to back this up, is healing. We want a pathway back to ourselves and feeling whole. Most survivors don't think punitively. They don't think, the first thought is not, I want to get him or her. It is, I want to get this thing out of me. And so there's a way that we can get caught up in this verdict. I have talked to Annabelle Esquire. I'm not trying to like name drop, but I've talked to these people, and they're not okay. And the media will portray one thing, but I know that their lives are not. They weren't like popping champagne bottles and cartwheeling in the street when this verdict came out. They were so scared that their lives were going to be torn apart through the process of the trial that so many of them were like, I almost don't wish I didn't have to do this. So I still see it as a way to look at how we think about, talk about, and support survivors of sexual violence. It's, regardless of whether you're an abolitionist or a whatever, people have the right to want the kind of justice they want. I'm not here to say one way, to be the judge one way or the other from my personal beliefs, but when you get it, the thing that happens to most survivors is when you get the thing you think you want, you realize you needed something else. And so this is a moment where we need to be clear that we can't put all our eggs in this basket. This verdict is a victory in some ways for the people who are involved. And symbolically, it is we don't have to deal with people saying, what about Weinstein anymore, even though they found a new reason to say that. But, there's some symbolic, there's symbolism in it that is important. And I think it's a shot in the arm for people to kind of be like, oh, Me Too isn't dead, even though we, still here doing this work. And so that way I'm grateful.
Can you talk a little bit more about how people like me, a white, privileged, middle-class person. I was
gonna say, you gotta be more clear, okay?
No. I'm gonna be specific. A white, privileged, middle-class woman like me. How I can't see some of what you have spent your life doing. And part of what you started in the Harvey Weinstein discussion was all good for those women if it helped them through this journey of healing.
Right.
And you could relate woman to woman to their need to survive and to heal. But that the needs of women of color is a different story.
Oh, absolutely.
Or can you talk about that a little more?
Well, I mean, Wendy, okay.
I know it's your life. I know it's your life.
Well, the reality is most survivors won't see the inside of a courtroom, right? But absolutely, most women of color won't even get to the process to file a claim or to go through any sort of judicial process at all. We have so many layers. This is where intersectionality really comes in, right? People aren't intersectional. This is like, when you're talking about I'm just speaking in a gendered way for a moment. If I'm a woman, I'm a Black woman, I have to, once I experience the harm, whatever it is, the 9 times out of 10, and this is a real statistic, it is another person who looks like me that caused the harm. And so now I have to contend with, do I initiate a process that will put this person, who I probably know, because most of us know the people who cause us harm, in the justice system? We have been socialized in both you as a white, middle class, blah, 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 privileged woman. I have been socialized most of my life to protect you. I have been socialized most of my life to defer to your pain. Even whether white men, black women, we have been socialized to respond to the vulnerability of white women. And because of that, we put aside so many things, and we push forward, right? This is the thing most Black women can resonate with. You just push forward. And I think a lot about, I'm writing my memoir now, and so I've been thinking a lot about what was missing as a young Black girl growing up. What was missing? What didn't I have? It still wasn't available when I started doing this work. And if you talk to a lot of Black women, there is probably another older Black woman in their life who kept them from telling their story or going out in the world and blah. And not because they didn't love them, but more so because they loved them and because they understood the ramifications of that. These are the things you can't see because you can't see in our interior lives. And most people aren't invested in the material lives of Black women, right? We are adornment. we undergird, we hold up, we soldier through, but we don't have a soft place to land. And so, yeah, it's it's a difficult burden to carry. And I've been put in this really terrible position, I think, as a person who is at the forefront of this and has become the face of this movement, to have this infighting that's happening in my community that I can't even talk to you about, right? I couldn't even have this conversation in detail because it's just too, we don't discuss certain things.
Right, it's
not.
It feels disloyal in some
Well,
ways.
yeah, and it's not really for public consumption, but there is a private conversation that needs to happen in our community that's not happening, and every day that it doesn't happen, it's just getting worse and worse and worse. And so a big part of my job in this moment is trying to figure out how to have those conversations. And for the first time in my life, I have this dual responsibility, which is really interesting, of being completely loyal to and attentive to my community and having to be for the world.
Yeah.
It's really interesting.
It's interesting, but it's also a huge burden.
I don't know what to call it. It doesn't feel like a burden, right? Because I also know that had I not been raised in this work the way I was raised in, and had Black women not nurtured me in this work and turned me into an organizer, I wouldn't know how to do it. I wouldn't know how to tend to my folks and tend to the world at the same time. There's some burdensome part of it, but also I can't say that I'm working on behalf of survivors and it not be all survivors. That's just not possible. And there's nothing that a white woman, what I found out in these last 2 years, the white women in Hollywood who came forward, who have all the privilege and all the money and all the blah, 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 they needed the same things that these little Black girls in Selma, Alabama needed when I started this work. It's not really different. This trauma is blind, right? This is why I say all the time, sexual violence doesn't discriminate. It's the response to sexual violence that we have to pay attention to.
So I'm going to ask you one more question, and then I'm going to turn to the audience, and because it's precious for you all to get a chance to ask questions, not just me. There are 4 microphones, 2 down here and 2 up in the rafters. So people, if you want to start to line up, you can. And just so you all know, my colleagues know I have a rule. If the first 2 questions are from guys, I'm going to stop until a woman gets a chance to ask a question. So, oh, good. Yeah. Thank you. And just remember, when I turn to you all, questions end with a question mark. They are short and pithy, and so that we can get in a lot of questions. And press are not allowed to ask questions here in the forum. So really want to focus on students and the community to ask questions. So my question to you before we start here is, given that the response is different, that there is still a lot of work to be done in meeting the needs of survivors, what do you think is most needed to do that?
I think that we have to have, what I've realized in the last 2 years is that more than, getting the perpetrators or naming the people and all, the world does not really understand what it looks like to survive. They don't understand what survival looks like, what it feels like, what it costs. And I mean, not just from an emotional place, from a very real place, in that, these are people who are going to be jurors, who are going to be jurists, who are going to affect our lives in various ways with very little information about what it looks like to carry this thing. And I think that the empathy part and empowerment through empathy works better if people have more information. You think that you're far away from this thing, but you're not. You are not. I promise you, if you are not a survivor, you know one, or both. And so in order for us to move the needle, there's lots of work that has to be done, but I think it is vital that we take a step back. We have so much misinformation, and I talk about this often, and my aha moment was during the Kavanaugh hearing, when I met this liberal woman in the bathroom who I thought we were commiserating about what we had just witnessed I was there, what we had just witnessed in the room, and she turned to me and said, "I just wish that she was a little more credible. I wish that she could remember some more details. I just, just to make it so that so we can get," and I said, when I realized that we were not on the same side of the coin, I said, "I never talk about my personal story because it's really nobody's business. And you shouldn't have to hear the gory details of my life to have empathy for what I'm telling you I'm carrying. So my story is not, when I'm ready and when I want to, I tell it." But I said to her, I said, "You know what? People who know me, my friends, they can testify that I have one of the worst memories ever. If you tell me something and you don't write it down, you don't put it in my it's gone. That's just, I eat almonds, I've tried ginkgo biloba, it's just not, doesn't work." And I always feel bad about that. But when I started doing this work on myself, going to therapy, I realized that I have such a terrible memory because I have spent 40 years trying to forget. I've been, every day of my life, I want to know less and less and less. I don't want those details. So the fact, even when I think about it now, I just get, the fact that this woman got up here in this room full of people who really don't care about her, and I mean the whole circle. It wasn't just half the room that didn't care about her, right? She got up in this room full of people and told as much as she could and poured her heart out. And you still want more. You don't understand what that took. And I think if people understood what our lives were like, because we are also mothering and lawyering and teaching and doing all the things, right, while we are holding this, and most of the time holding it at bay. People don't get that. People don't see it. I'm dramatic, so I call us the walking wounded. But it is because our wounds are on the inside. When a child, I'm going to my preacher mode, I'm sorry, but it's just like, but when a child is shot in the street in a community, people rally around that family. We see it all the time. You say, and the people in the community say, this is unconscionable. We cannot have children being shot in the street. They feel very connected they connect their own safety to that. And they say, we can't live in a community where children aren't even safe. We got to get these guns off the street, right? They hold space for the parents, and they come out and they do night vigils and community, meetings and things like that. I have seen whole communities come together around gun violence, as they should. What happens when a child is molested in a community? There's silence. And the silence gets passed on, and people say, "Don't talk about that." Well, we don't know what really happened. Well, you know what kind of family they come from. Well, you've seen what kind of person this is. It is the opposite reaction. People don't connect their own safety to that situation, but more so, we don't feel accountable. We don't feel responsible. When there's gun violence and other drugs, all these other kind of things that are in our community, we feel some personal responsibility. And this is why people don't fight around sexual violence the way they should, because we don't see it as a social justice issue. It's an individual issue. It's go get counseling, go get therapy, go to the center, get all the things that you need. But when one person loses bodily autonomy in a community, that whole community suffers. And if we don't start thinking about it from that perspective, we will have survivors just out here trying to fend for themselves, when that's not the way, this is not our burden to carry.
Thank you.
Thank you.
Okay, I think you were the first person to get to a microphone, so we'll start over here, then we'll go over here, and then we'll go up.
Oh, okay.
Remember, be brief, and with a question mark.
Is this
And
on?
tell us who
Yes.
you are, please.
Okay, thank you so much for being here. My name is Catherine Williams. I'm a student at HKS. My question is about how HKS and CPL can show courage and that personal responsibility. So HKS and CPL have several connections to people who are professionally and personally connected to Epstein. And moving forward, how can we address those tensions? How can we move forward and have institutional accountability for that?
Well, I think you have to, thank you for that. But I think that you have to have transparency, right? Courage in a lot of places, especially in institutions, often just looks like transparency. I'm sure that they didn't go out recruiting people, right? This is something that happens. I got to the point where I didn't even want to take pictures with men sometimes, because I'm like, I don't want this popping up on me 10 years from now and something comes out, whatever. So you don't often know. It's the truth. Like, let's get a group shot. But in all seriousness, you don't often know. But once you know, it's your responsibility to be transparent, to be really clear, to listen to what people are what the students, whoever the people are affected, are asking for. So at this point, once the administration, once the people who make decisions know, there should be a meeting set up, right? So what is it that we can do? Oftentimes, I think we think administrators just know. They're going to make whatever, if they don't hear from the students, they're going to make whatever decision feels best for them, or no decision at all. And so I think you make your voice heard about it and say, listen, we get, that you may not have known this, but now that we know, we have to deal with this up front. It's just, I was in a situation about Epstein last year because he was everywhere, right? This is how the folks do. They all know each other and they blah, blah, blah. And I got an award from another school that was connected to Epstein. And God helped me when I found that out. I'm like, I can't get away from it, and that school did not handle it well. So I hope that Harvard will handle that in a way that feels courageous. And I think once you show courage, you'll see that people will meet you right where you are. They just want to see you take that first step and say, I'm not going to hide behind this. I'm not going to cower. I'm going to face it head on, because this is an important issue to us. And it sends a signal to the rest of the school and the other, the community. Like I said, Harvard is an example for other institutions. This is how you do this. You look it dead in the eye and say, we made a mistake, or we took too long, or whatever the thing is, but here's what we're going to do moving forward. And I hope that happens. You're welcome.
Please, ma'am.
Sure. My name is Laverne Gordon. I run a nonprofit called Love Life Now. We promote year-round awareness against domestic violence. And the idea of domestic violence and sexual assault, oftentimes they intertwine, right?
Yeah.
And so I come into contact, I'm not on the front line, I'm not aiding victims and survivors in shelter, but again, we try to point people in the right direction for help, among other things. And so a lot of the times we come into contact with survivors of sexual assault that, like you said, do not feel committed or connected to the Me Too movement. And my question to you is how do we, on a ground level, doing this work, how do we sort of work towards getting folks, I'm a survivor of domestic violence, so I'll put that out there. So I come to this work from a personal level. But like I said, as it relates to sexual assault, how do we, on a ground level, help people get to that level? Do you ever think it will ever funnel through or trickle down to communities of color where this is affecting?
Yeah. Yes, I do. And it's because of the mainstreaming of Me Too that's happened, right? And so people don't really know what it is. They don't know. They have this idea that it's a thing that started online, that's here to take down powerful white men. And so why would you feel connected to that? It has nothing to do with you. They're not going to take down your boss or your coach or your uncle. They're not here to do that. And so what people who know, like you, when you get this information, you have to say, no, this is about resources. Look at their website, listen to these talks, whatever, and point them in the right direction. Our work, our programs that we've taken 2 years to really work hard to build out programs specifically so that we are hitting marginalized groups first. And so that we get to the people who usually don't get the resources first. And I hope over the next year or so that'll start changing as people see the work in their community. Because rightfully so, if you only see me on TV every now and again, and when you hear Me Too, you see hashtags and rich white men, why would you feel connected to that? So I don't blame people for that. This is not enough information. So if you can help, and that's for everybody. When people ask me what can they do, talk about this movement differently. say what you see on television is not the movement. What the media has told you is not the movement. The movement is on the ground, it's in communities, and it's community-based and focused.
Thank you.
Thank you.
I think we have another community resource up there.
Hi.
Hi, my name is Erica Perez. I work for the Network Lared, which is a survivor-led organization that's helps survivors of partner abuse or domestic violence and LGBTQT and SM communities, and poly too. So my question is, how do you think the experiences of gender non-conforming folks and non-binary folks and transgender folks fit into the whole Me Too movement?
Well, you know, I always drag out my child at this moment. This is my credibility badge. I'm like the white person who got a black friend. I'm like, I got a queer daughter. They don't mind. But the reason why that's important is because I'm very clear that how my work was shaped prior to my child being out and queer and after has changed dramatically. And so I see the holes in the work, I see the holes in the movement at large, and sorry, I forgot I can't do that. In my own capacity, I try to bring that conversation to the forefront, but I think that it is going to take just some real intention that is sort of missing. And it's not just, I can say the same thing about disabled folks, I can say the same thing about indigenous folks. Like, there are these tracks that people are on, and it's sort of separated. It's very separated, and until we kind of figure out how to converge those and say we're working towards the same thing, but we have different needs, then I think it'll be, we can have a more cohesive movement happening. There's a lot of, we're not included, we're not included, we're not included, and I try to get people to say, you are a part of this movement. You don't have to be tagged in, you don't have to be pledged, you are part of this movement if you say you are, and take ownership of it in that way. But I do recognize there are barriers to being like at the forefront and the voice of. But I'm learning on a regular basis and trying to do a better and better job and bring other people and do an better job, and not like saying, oh, and we got some queer people in here, don't forget the queer people. And it be an organic part of the conversation. But yeah, I recognize there's a lot of work to do around that.
Thank you. Please.
Hi, my name is Jackie Rotman. First of all, thank you so much for the impact you've had on so many of us. I'm deeply grateful for you.
Thank you.
And I wanted to ask you about alternative justice. You talked a lot about how not all survivors want punitive responses. We want healing and justice. When I was raped at Harvard 3 years ago, I wanted a restorative justice process and was told that the university was at least 10 years away from ever being able to offer something like that. So how do we build a culture that sees justice as more than the way that it's largely been depicted and creates options for survivors? How do we change our thinking as a culture in ways that allow for more options for justice?
Girl, if I had the answer to that, we would be further ahead in this work. I have my own beliefs around that include restorative and transformative justice. One of the things that I have had to, but I've always struggled because of my work around sexual violence. And I try to be transparent about that. I don't believe that the judicial process is here to serve us, both from a standpoint of the process is the judicial system is corrupted, but also that the laws are so narrow that they do not cover the breadth of what sexual violence is and does. And I have talked a lot recently about shifting this framework. So the how is the real heavy lift. And I think it is just, some of the ways I think we do it is, like I said, in these institutions. If we can have institutions start to model how they work, because you can create incubators where you can try these things out. There's an organization, which I'm gonna forget, out of Chicago, that used this restorative justice process in their community, and it worked so beautifully, and they're writing about it, and they built a curriculum around it, and they just, things like that have to happen. We have to try out these different models and see what works. And I think part of it is because people don't listen to survivors. You know, they don't listen to us. We're always engaged from a place of pity. And like, we just need services, but we don't have information about how a way forward. So I think one of the hows that people need to start listening to survivors more, listening to what we say we want and what we need. And we have to start and part of what we need to articulate when they listen to us is that the crime and punishment framework doesn't work. It just doesn't work and a big part of that is because so much of the harm that is caused doesn't rise to the level of crime. And so that if you harm a person, just in life, if you harm a person, there should be some accountability for the harm that you caused. So if we move to a framework that was about harm and harm reduction, then we have a wider breadth of options to work from when it comes to accountability. I can run that off like nothing, right? Putting that into practice is the part that's just difficult. And I would love to see more colleges and universities be the start to that, so that we can have a study and we can say, look, this is working here and here and here in these different places. Let's maybe model that in our prisons. Let's maybe model that like in these different places and just build out from there. But I believe, 10 years is probably generous, honestly. And hopefully we can speed that number up in places like Harvard, so that we can say, look what Harvard has done. Look at this amazing thing. They did this project, they piloted for 2 years and had all these amazing results. We want to do that at Yale.
You've got our number. So.
But thank you for that question.
Thank you. And I did not mean to say that no man can't ask a question.
I was going to say, you're not going to have that problem here.
No. So anyway, please, Chrissy.
Hi, I'm Chrissy. I'm an MPP student here at the Kennedy School and a Gleitzman Fellow. And I'm so grateful for your work, and particularly seeing your work play out as I came of age as a woman in the workplace. I worked on Capitol Hill when Kavanaugh was appointed to the Supreme Court. And I think that I have seen a lot of progress in the way that people talk about this, but something that I have not been able to break through is, and I think is one of the most upsetting responses to talking about this, is that young men need to be careful nowadays because a woman could just decide to ruin their lives. And how do you respond to that? Because I've found that there is almost nothing that breaks through that.
Yeah, part of the way I break through that, if I'm inclined to have the conversation, part of the way I break through is to talk about the reality of what the work is. And I've had conversations with mothers who's like, well, I have a son and I'm worried about my son. And I said, well, if you are really worried about your son, I hope you're having conversations with your son about boundaries and consent and respect, and having an ongoing conversation. Because honestly, what some of the demand is when we are talking about changing how we operate around sexual violence is that we want investigation. We want people to be taken seriously. We want for somebody that when they make a claim that they're not told, you don't want to pursue this, or you don't want to really go down this road because blah, blah, blah. Those investigations, those things are really, they'll help your child. So if your child is, didn't do anything, go through a process and let's see where we come on the other end. But also, I think some of what I was talking about to this young person here, follow me, I'm not being hypocritical, but just follow me for a second. Some of what I also see on college campuses is this idea, and not just on college campuses, is this idea if men and boys would just change, that this would all end. This would all be over and life can go on and there'd be no sexual violence. And that's just not true. One, because men and boys are also survivors, right? And we have to acknowledge this is not a women's movement, it's a survivors movement. And so I think sometimes when we talk about the breadth of the work and include the fact that men are both survivors, men are allies, and most men aren't, blah, 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 it makes people feel a little more comfortable. But there are some ways I think that we have to restructure the way we talk about what's needed to end sexual violence that doesn't center male behavior alone, that I think would help ease other people when they hear the way we talk about the movement, right? Women can be obviously sexist, misogynist. We all were raised in patriarchy and carry patriarchal ideas and to a certain extent. And so all of that has to be unlearned and undone. And I know, again, on college campuses, I ask girls this all the time. We ask the boys about, how many of you, a lot of them say, I'm a good guy, and I would never. And I ask them, well, what about rape jokes? Do you laugh at rape jokes? But then I ask the girls, how many of you have called a girl a slut based on random information that you heard about her? That is also upholding rape culture. Right? And so we have to look at the whole picture and not just make it centered around male behavior. And I think, I'm not really here to appease those people, to be quite honest. But I do understand because of the hype around it. People have all this bad information and false notions around it. But, raise your sons well, you won't have anything to worry about. Maybe. And, yeah, I'm sorry. This is a bad answer probably, but I hope I helped you a little bit. Okay, good.
Over here. I think
Hi.
we'll have time for here, and there.
Okay.
Go ahead.
My name's Bhargavi. I'm a first year at the college, and I actually heard you speak at Latasha Brown's study group last semester.
Oh, yeah, that was great.
Yeah, and what you said to me back then, actually really impacted me in a very, positive way, so, thank you for that. But I wanted to ask about, the generational trauma that can happen in families and communities and how what happened to me happened to my mother, to my father, to her mother, and regardless of an individual's experience, it's ingrained in you, in the norms of your culture. And how do you begin to push back against that and counter those norms or have those very difficult conversations with the people closest to you when it has been not spoken about for centuries before then?
Listen, it's just, as you know, because you're asking the question, it is really hard. One of the things that I am so in awe of and really proud of when I see your generation, this generation of young people is so different and really bold and courageous in a way that is changing some of these norms. And so I see a lot of young people, students your age group who are just this is enough, and are pushing through to have these different conversations or just operating differently. And by that I mean, there are ways that I talk about this a lot, and particularly in communities of color, we raise our girls in particular with a set of rules, but not a lot of I don't know what the right word is, but many of you will recognize this, right? We get raised and told, don't sit on a man's lap, right? How many times have we heard that you never sit on a man's lap, you never put some clothes on when a man comes by the house, all of these kind of things, but you're never told why. You're never told what am I protecting myself from, and why is this person bad? We don't get into those kind of conversations. And what I see happening with younger people is they're asking those questions and they're pushing back and they're standing in that. That's not always possible. Culturally, that's just not always possible, right? I love when people tell me, well, why didn't you just tell your mother? I'm like, tell my mother what? What? Nothing. So I get that. I think that the other piece is, if you are in a situation where you can't, sometimes you have to find community outside of family to get that strength from, and find other people who maybe culturally have the same background that you can, build do some problem solving with them. Because I can stand here and tell you a bunch of things and you might be like, that wouldn't work in my family. But if you got together with folks who have a similar situation and try to think about how to break through, or if you can't get it from the family, to get it in other places, which is hard. It's hard to hear that sometimes, but it's just the reality. I don't ever think I'll get from my mother what I needed, right? I can't go back in time and get what I needed. I love her. I cherish her. I think she's an amazing person, but I had to go somewhere else to get that. And that's just my reality.
So because I know we're at 7 o'clock, but we have people who are desperate to ask their questions, what I want you to do is real quickly If you'll do your question, but real quickly, Mike, you do your question real quickly, you do your question real quickly.
Is somebody gonna remember
you
all the
answer
questions?
whatever, I'll write it down for you. Then you can answer whatever you want.
Okay.
Okay. Go ahead, real quick.
Hi, my name's Anushka, and I'm a junior at Brookline High School, and I'm also an intern at BARC, which is the Boston Area Rape Crisis Center.
Okay.
And my parents are originally from India, and I know that's a country where really there's so much sexual violence and domestic violence. And so my question is, how can we extend the Me Too movement worldwide and
that's a good
affect
Good
them?
question.
Okay. Good.
Mike?
Thank you so much. My name is Mike Jeppes. I'm an MPP at Harvard Kennedy School. My question is on behalf of the Harvard Graduate Student Union, which is that the students went on strike for over a month across Harvard University, seeking protections against racial discrimination and violence and sexual assault and sexual harassment. Harvard has continued to fail to meet those demands. And it's interesting because the policies that would be approved are enforceable by court, not just by school policy. What do you think might be some factors that are encouraging Harvard to be so antagonistic towards survivors across the students?
Wait, towards survivors, you said?
Towards survivors who are also graduate students, by not supporting sexual harassment and sexual assault policies that could protect those students.
This is the debate, the negotiation between the Graduate Student Union and the administration,
Okay.
particularly around Title IX sexual harassment and so forth, and they haven't been able to come to an agreement. Is
Well,
that a
I'm
fair,
gonna come
fair
back.
point, Mike? And
Okay.
down here, you can ask real quickly.
Hi, I'm Madiha. I'm from the Graduate School of Education. Retweet Mike about the Graduate Student Union. You've mentioned a few times about institutions having courage. In my experience, institutions don't have courage, individuals do, and they have to put pressure on the institutions so that they can act accordingly. I'm wondering, in your work, what have you observed at the local level that have been effective means of putting pressure on institutions or organizations? And I'm also curious about your thoughts on more vigilante forms of justice, such as when communities decide to out perpetrators of violence. Yeah.
Got it. So the questions are, how do you take the Me Too movement worldwide? Any suggestions for the negotiation going on to get Harvard to meet some of the needs that the students have put forward around sexual harassment? And local level pressure and vigilante pressure as a tactic, a method to deal with some of these issues.
Okay, I'll work backwards because I think this answer is connected to this answer, which is I'm not sure how much organizing is happening around this. I know there was some in December because that's when we were originally supposed to have this. Organizing is always my answer. It's what I default to. When you need to put pressure on people and you need to push them to be courageous, you have to organize. And I would say that particularly because this generation has so many more resources than we had, you need to think differently about organizing. It's not always going to be, protesting or sitting in or whatever. So get together, get some people in the room who people wouldn't expect you to sit down with amongst the student body. Maybe I don't know how this breaks out. But, the Black Student Union should be talking to the sororities or whoever the heck, right? But get some people in the room who have similar issues but maybe come from different places and think of some new and innovative ways to push back. Because you have power. And the thing I say to college students all the time is you have power now. You don't have to wait till you graduate. You don't have to wait till you finish. You got a power in your pocketbook because you're paying tuition. Right? There are so many different ways in which you have power. You need to sit down and examine what those are and use that power to push back. People, they obviously hear you. They hear you. And I know the negotiations are going on and we'll see what happens on the other end. I don't know enough about it to say that they're not trying to protect survivors. I'm sure there's something in there somewhere. There always is. And, just keep pushing until you get to what the nugget is. What is the thing? I don't know what it is at all, but I know there's a thing. There's always a thing. And just be relentless about that. Just how far are you willing to go and how much pressure are you willing to put on? I damn near didn't graduate from school because I was putting on pressure. And now I'm 40-something years old, like maybe I should have stepped back a little bit, but I don't know regrets. I don't know about vigilante justice. I think that I've seen some of the calling out of there's been schools where they've listed the names of professors who have And I think that has sparked other people to come forward. I just think I probably have to give some more thought to where I really stand on something like that, because it also can be dangerous for the people. Like, I think you can put yourself in a position that could potentially be dangerous. And I think as I've gotten older, some of the danger that I was okay with, I don't want my child to be in danger. So I'm like, wait, don't do that. But you have to be, vigilante is a strong word. And so you have to be very careful about how you put yourself back in proximity to be harmed again, particularly if you've experienced some kind of harm. So I don't know. I'm not really sure. I'd have to see more examples of what that looked like. Calling out might not be too bad, but just make sure you're protected. And also, there's a thing about protecting the people, right? There's just too much at risk, I think, sometimes when we do that. But sometimes it's a measure. I keep doing this, sorry. It's a measure we have to just take. Uh-oh, did I mess up?
You got it back.
Okay, here we go. Okay.
Me Too around the world.
Oh, that's the easy question. Okay, so where'd you go? Oh, hi. So we are launching a global network. We actually are, now I'm telling you this big secret, don't tell anybody. But I'll be in Rwanda in April as the kickoff to our global network that is going to include 10 countries to start with. One of them is India. We connected with the people. The beautiful thing about Me Too going viral in other countries in particular was that for so many other countries, there are places like the UN and UNICEF who do big work in these countries, right? But a lot of time it just doesn't reach the ground. And with Me Too, the hashtag and other countries, it was everyday people using this hashtag, starting their own little movements online. And it was democratizing, right? And so we reached out to some of the people who started hashtags in their country, or they reached out to us. And these are everyday folks who just want to learn how to do this work. And that's really exciting because we get to create sort of a global grassroots movement. And so part of what we're doing is this listening tour. I've been to Australia. Sweden is off the map with Me Too. It's really amazing what they're doing out there. And we're going to Rwanda, South Africa, India, Ghana, I'm probably not, I don't know, Belize, someplace hot. But there's, to expand this work and particularly dealing with people who started these hashtags online and have a little cadre of folks that want to learn and build the movement out. So I'm very excited about that. Yeah,
well, ladies and gentlemen, I think we could probably go all evening. I think for me, all day today and this evening, and hopefully for a little while longer this evening, I've learned to listen in a different way. I think many of us have different kinds of survivor stories. Mm-hmm. And to reflect on that and to figure out how to organize and how to get things done on the ground for that healing that you have spent your life committed to. I'm so incredibly proud to be part of the process that led to your becoming the Gleitzman Award winner this year.
Thank you.
And I hope you all will join me in thanking Tarana for sharing with us tonight.
Thank you. Thank you. You give me
Even if you have a cut.
I don't care. Thank you. Thank you. Thank you. Thank you. Am I just going to go sit down now? Am I going to sit down now?